what do you make of Eurozone? 1.2%? Not the end of the world.
The world is definitely not ending, but as the correspondent just said, Germany, which is the world's third largest exporting nation, is kind of, their economy is kind of in the toilet, and Italy's back in the same place, and that is the third largest sovereign bond market in the world. So the places where we see weakness out of Europe are definitely unsettling, especially when we continue to get corroborating evidence that Germany is pulling the rest of Europe down with it. This might be the last quarter that we see a positive number on that quarter-over-quarter basis.
Yeah, and I'm going to, listen, this show goes out around the world, hence the name Worldwide Exchange. And I don't want to insult any of the viewers out there that are watching in Europe, but really, is Germany and maybe the Italian banks the only thing we need to watch on the continent? I mean, obviously, you've got Brexit, but is it really just about what happens to Germany is kind of what happens to everybody else?
Well, Germany certainly is the game changer and the outlier, because in prior Euro upsets during the current recovery that's been going on for over a decade, Germany has been the standout strength on the continent, and that is no longer the case. But we've also started to see slowing in France, in Germany. It's not near as acute as it is in Germany, but it is not only a German economy, Italian bank story anymore, and that tells you that if Germany's economy gets hit hard enough, that it could take the rest of the continent down with it, and because they all trade with each other, as you know, Brian.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of today's jobs number here in the United States? What are your expectations?
Well, look, the ADP number threw everybody's expectations off yesterday. It was obviously a blowout number, much better than what anybody had been anticipating. It was led by very small businesses, up to 19 employees creation on their end, up 26,000 after 3 months of declines. So it's hard to say that we're necessarily going to get a big disappointment, but the ADP number was the only standout. We saw ISM manufacturing employment, ISM non-manufacturing, the services employment sector, that went down appreciably as well, that their employment index. And we had the market services index come down to the lowest level since February 2010. That index came in at 50.4. That's just on the cusp of contraction. And we've started to see weakness seep into the services sector, warehouse, real estate, transportation. High tech was what led challenger layoffs in the month of August. So I think the greatest concern going into this report is it is no longer an isolated manufacturing recession story in the United States. We've actually started to see seepage into that services sector, which is 80% of the U.S. economy.
Oh, okay, sit tight, Daniel. Don't go anywhere. I want to go to Contessa Brewer now. She's got some sound from probably the most well-known billionaire in the world. Then I want to get your reaction. So here's some good news, maybe. Hedge fund mogul Ray Dalio scaling back his forecast of a recession in America over the next year. Let's get that news with Contessa.
Okay, so Brian, Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, says he now sees a 25% chance of a recession in the U.S. through the end of 2020. And he warns, though, that central banks are limited in the actions they can take to avert a downturn. Last month, Dalio told CNBC there was a 40% chance of recession before the 2020 election. That was shortly after the U.S. yield curve inverted for the first time in more than a decade, a historic warning sign of a looming recession. Dalio lists 4 unique factors he says have not existed since the 1930s. He believes these will determine the severity of the next recession. 1, the effectiveness of central bank policies. 2, the wealth gap. 3, the U.S. election, and finally, the growing influence of China. Dalio says the Fed, the ECB, and the Bank of Japan have to face the fact that when the next downturn comes, there won't be the power to reverse it in the same way that existed before. And he says the Fed should cut rates slowly and by small increments rather than rushing to stimulate the economy. Bridgewater's flagship fund, Pure Alpha, is reportedly down about 6% through late last month. Brian.
All right, Contessa, thank you very much. So, Danielle, back to you. You're in Dallas. You used to work for the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Here's Dalio saying the Federal Reserve simply is, shooting blanks, for lack of a better term. They're not going to have the power to reverse the recession. What say you?
Well, Dalio sounds a little bit like Hurricane Dorian. It sounds like the strength is dissipating. And as well as the speed, which is what I think what people in North Carolina want to hear. Dalio's message, I think, is going to be music to Jay Powell's ears. You know, he's speaking later today. The Fed is about to go into blackout in front of, oh my gosh, we have to stop listening to Fed speak for a few days, Brian, if you're going to have to find something else to do with your spare time. But I think Dalio's message will resonate with the Federal Reserve because outside of Eric Rosengren of the Boston Fed, I think that they want to be able to maintain their ammunition and not do a dramatic interest rate cut when they meet on September the 18th, regardless of what happens with the European Central Bank next week.